left with Grixis Delver, Karl Schultz on your right with Food Chain. Let's get right into the game here. I'm curious how this matchup plays out, because in my head, Grixis Delver is pretty far ahead, but if Food Chain just deploys a mishmash of creatures, they don't actually even have to combo.
Yeah, the deck has this kind of fair-ish plan where they cast Baleful Strixes. There's 3 copies in Schultz's deck list here. There's a Leovold in the deck as well, a couple Walking Ballista. It actually has added Hydroid Krasis, a singleton copy of that one. You can make a bunch of mana with Food Chain and really go to work with the Krasis here. We see Haung on the play with Volcanic Island, and Schultz is going to have turn 1 Relic of Progenitus off of Basic Island.
So one of the coolest things, in my opinion, for this Food Chain deck is the fact that it can play this very fair game plan. Before the banning of Deathrite Shaman, it was a Deathrite Shaman Noble Hierarch deck that could ramp into a turn 2 Food Chain and combo kill you. Just, you exile your own creature, make an extra mana, and then you just chain it up. You hit your emissaries or what have you, and eventually you just cast some X creature or giant creature after you get your Misthaul Griffin, which, of course, combos super well with that Food Chain.
Turn 2 for Haung was Cracking Scolding Tarn to 19. For Underground Sea, Young Pyromancer is the play. Schultz just had a Misty Rainforest, and now the Pyromancer will be knocking him to 20.
Yeah, not the best start here from Karl Schultz. No plays on turns 1 or 2. I'm very curious what's in his hand. He's going to be facing down this Young Pyromancer, and even though Relic of Progenitus is quite good against Bob Wong's Gurmag Anglers, it is not good against these 2 threats that have been deployed in True Name Nemesis and Young Pyromancer.
Yeah, that True Name Nemesis is going to catch a Force of Will from Schultz. Haung had to fetch to cast it. Schultz is going to pay 1 for the Force, so 18 all seem to be the life total. 17 rather for Schultz, 18 to Haung.
Now, interestingly enough, one of the coolest combinations in the Food Chain deck is using cards like Force of Will to exile Misthaul Griffin, and then later on you can just cast it from exile.
Interesting thing you were discussing, Schultz is not really getting off the ground. This used to be a Deathrite Shaman deck prior to the banning of that card, and Schultz has chosen to register 3 copies of Birds of Paradise. So those are the big turn 1 plays in the deck. Pretty curious about that number.
Well, I mean, Schultz values mana acceleration to an extent, but his deck is actually designed to play a good mid-range game plan. 3 copies of Baleful Strix go a long way in protecting your life total, and just a whole bunch of things like Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy that kind of walk up the curve, if you will, to give you that interaction that you may need early on.
So Schultz is going to sacrifice a Misty Rainforest to 16, finds Basic Forest. There's Assassin's Trophy on Young Pyromancer. Haung will fail to find, as many of these 3-color Legacy decks do.
I'm not sure if that's Alternate Art, Abrupt Decay, or if it's Assassin's
right.
Trophy. But either way, Bob Wong does have 1 island. So if it's Assassin's Trophy, that means he has an island in hand. And if it's Abrupt Decay, then it's all good and clear.
No, you're right. That's the WMC promo, I believe. Good catch.
Oh, that's fine. So Trinket Mage here has a few hits, but Relic of Progenitus is one of the better ones. I'm curious what he has to go get here, but Daze takes care of that one.
Yeah, frequently those 2 main deck Walking Ballista are kind of what they go to work with. Really good in the Young Pyromancer matchups, but that Daze will cleanly answer that for Haung. Now at his turn, he's going to be using a Thought Scour. Really wants to get another threat online. The Relic of Progenitus, though, has been exiling a lot of Huang's graveyards, and you mentioned he's on a 4 Gurmag Angler build.
Yeah, and this is it's obviously after containing those other 2 threats, getting rid of the True Name Nemesis with Force of Will, and then using Abrupt Decay to take care of Young Pyromancer. Bob Wong is a little threat light, and he's just got a bunch of answers and mana in hand. Going to be looking to find a Brainstormer to translate those into real threats.
Yeah, not much going on. He'll pass back over on Schultz's side. He's going to start his turn with a Brainstorm, see if he can get something going. You see that Hydroid Krasis hanging out in his hand. He's a ways away from taking advantage of that one.
All I know is that if Karl Schultz gets to cast a big Hydroid Krasis, I want a face shot of Bob Wong. I just want to see the reaction, because that is not one you see every day in Legacy. But that's been a common trend here. A lot of these newer cards that are dominating Standard are powerful enough to be fitting into Legacy. Thief of Sanity, Hydroid Krasis, earlier in the day, Arclight Phoenix. These are Standard staples.
So Schultz puts 2 back with his Brainstorm. No way to reset the deck. He'll just activate the Relic and pass to Haung, who is going to start with a Brainstorm, and he still has an uncracked Flooded Strand, so this might be a very big turn for him. Play a Polluted Delta, and here's Delver's Secrets. There's a threat online. A lot of work to do on the life total, but this is a start.
Yeah. Schultz is kind of brainstorm locked, so you may actually see him pop this Relic of Progenitus, and that may be exactly what Bob needs in order to unlock these Gurmag Anglers. But Food Chain here, that's going to change the texture of this game.
Yeah, looking like Schultz may have just left some good ones on top with the Brainstorm. As Abrupt Decay on the Delver, Food Chain is going to be the play for his turn. This one, if you don't play Legacy, you certainly never see this. And if you do play Legacy, you don't see it that often. It's a 3-mana enchantment that lets you exile a creature you control to make that creature's mana cost +1 in mana, and you can only use that mana to cast creature spells.
Right. It used to be pretty busted with the card Goblin Ringleader. It was used alongside Goblin Recruiter and Goblin Ringleader to effectively draw your deck and play out all your goblins, and that in turn would give them all haste, and you would use something like Goblin Sharpshooter to kill your opponent. It was actually to the point where it actually got Goblin Recruiter banned in Legacy, and it's still banned today.
So you saw Haung crack a fetch land there down to 17, and Daze took care of that Food Chain. So once again, both players just kind of hanging out with no pressure on the table.
Yeah, having answered that Food Chain was a pretty huge win for Bob Wong, though he's still just giving Karl Schultz infinite time.
And now Haung does have a fairly big graveyard, to the point where if he had a Gurmag Angler, it'd be sort of trivial to cast it. Wonder when Schultz might think about cracking that Relic of Progenitus.
Well, I'm not sure. I think there's a pretty good chance he cracks it this turn. I think he just has another Food Chain in hand, needs another mana to play around another Daze.
Right, so Huang's going to start his turn with a Ponder. Looked like he kept those ones on top pretty quickly. Looking at maybe casting a Brainstorm, and he will.
He must have really liked those two cards.
And he still does have an uncracked Flooded Strand, so he'll be able to reset this Brainstorm if he desires.
Just a lot of spinning, but neither player really applying pressure, so both players just have a ton of time.
There's a sacrifice of Flooded Strand. He'll go to 16, and now Schultz is going to take this window of opportunity to exile the Relic of Progenitus. This is a really heads-up sequence here, so Haung can't go find a black source and cast a Gurmag Angler.
Right. No, that was a very good play from him.
Seems to be a little bit of a squabble at the table. Not sure what that was, but it seems to be resolved anyway as Haung finds a Volcanic Island.
Now, if he has a Delver of Secrets here or replays the land that he returned earlier with a Daze, he can cast something to start applying some pressure, but that Relic of Progenitus did a number on any potential Gurmag Anglers that he's looking for.
Yeah, well, the threat is Delver of Secrets. He'll go back Schultz's way. Start with Underground Sea. Maybe you could cast a Mist Hologriffin. Ooh, it's just Food Chain with Daze backup, though. So that one's on the table. But Schultz needs more than that to actually start going off. I believe that he exiled Mist Hologriffin earlier to force at will, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And next turn, he could just potentially cast the Mist Hologriffin. And Bob Wong's going to need a hard counter to get rid of it. Otherwise, it's going to be in a bit of trouble. Karl Schultz's hand here looks pretty good, though. Force of Will, I can't really see the rest, but Force of Will is a good means of protection if he's looking to gain infinite mana next turn. Maybe play a Hydroid Crisis.
So for Haung, it looked like he had a look at Misty Rainforest with his Delver, and he's going to Thought Scour before the draw step, clear that off the top. And now he's going to cast a Ponder. And you see how graveyard effects like Relic of Progenitus, over enough time, you do get the graveyard back to get an Angler online. But now, with Schultz just having the Food Chain, it doesn't take too much for him to assemble an actual combo from here.
Right. I mean, just casting the Mist Hologriffin from exile, that special ability that it has, allows him to gain infinite mana. And then pair that with a Walking Ballista or Hydroid Crisis, or even a Trinket Mage, which goes and gets Walking Ballista, and you've got yourself a kill. Now, Bob needs a hard counter here, or he's going to be in some trouble.
Gonna cast a Brainstorm. It's the third cantrip he's cast this turn.
I mean, Grix is not notorious for being able to remove enchantments once they're on the battlefield, so it's stop the Mist Hologriffin or bust.
Enchantment's kind of Grixis' blind spot.
Right. But, I mean, that's just the case with the color combination itself.
There's an attack with Delver, and then a Wasteland on the Underground Sea. Schultz is at 15. And we saw him miss land drops before, so he can no longer cast the Mist Hollow Griffin without a draw. This is nice, though. Baleful Strix. That's actually +1 mana towards casting a Griffin.
Yeah, and Bob actually has a decision here. Does he let the Baleful Strix resolve? If he does, Karl gets to just cast Mist Hollow Griffin. If he chooses to try to counter it with a Force of Will, then he might just lose on the spot.
So the Strix does resolve. Schultz will draw the card for that. See if he wants to go for that Griffin.
Well, he has Hydrocrisis and he has Mist Hollow Griffin. And he also has a Force of Will. So if the Hydrocrisis is his only form of infinite, like able to use the infinite mana, and he has to pitch it to the Force of Will, it's not great. But let's see how this plays out.
Yeah, so Schultz did exile the Strix. He's going to cast the Mist Hollow Griffin from exile. Haung is going to catch that with the Force of Will, and Schultz is going to force back.
Yep. And the Mist Hollow Griffin sticks. Karl's going to exile it and gain infinite mana. Both green and blue, because each time you generate 1 extra. And he's going to draw his deck here, finding a Walking Ballista and as much protection as he needs. And this should be all she wrote.
Looks like he's leaving exactly 2 cards in his deck. But as you mentioned, yeah, the Walking Ballista, you just get to work with the Griffin again, make that infinite, or at least 30-30. That's going to dispatch Bob Haung, and these players will go to game 2.
A Deltron strategy.
Well, check out the sideboards for these players. You're not going to find any enchantment hate for Haung, but I guess we don't have them on the screen just yet, so we'll just read them off here.
Yeah, I mean, you can check them out on the Cardboard Live extension, I believe. They'll be up in just a second, but we're going to go over the sideboards. But first, let's actually talk about what happened in that game. Just a quick recap.
Sure.
Bob Haung, he deployed a Young Pyromancer on 2. Didn't ever cast an instant or sorcerer with it. Decided to go for a True Name Nemesis on 3. That got hit with a Force of Will. Okay. Karl Schultz untaps, uses Abrupt Decay to take care of Young Pyromancer. Completely wipes out Bob Haung's pressure. Uses Relic of Progenitus to eat the graveyard, completely invalidating something like Gurmag Angler. And Bob Haung just not able to apply any real pressure. This Food Chain deck played such a good, fair game plan in Game 1, and I'm really impressed by it.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of players like about Food Chain, right? It's not the fastest combo deck. In fact, you're usually planning on sticking a 3-mana enchantment, untapping, and doing more stuff that costs more mana, right?
Right.
But the fact that you get to just cast Baleful Strix in your combo deck, the Leovold can be pretty powerful, and Walking Ballista actually just matches up against a lot of the most popular threats in the format as well.
Right, and that was one thing that I noticed when I was testing out Food Chain on Versus Live a while back, was that when you could go Deathrite Shaman into Leovold, no matter what the rest of your deck was, that was usually good enough to win a couple games in Legacy,
Yeah.
If your opponent doesn't have the removal spell, all their brainstorms and ponders and everything are kind of locked out. And even if they do have the removal spell, you still get to draw a card. Get to keep playing Magic. Leovold, just a really strong card that this Food Chain deck has access to.
Yeah, and definitely with Grixis being probably the most popular color set in Legacy right now, Grixis Delver, Grixis Control, and you have things like the Grixis Phoenix deck, etc. There's not much in the ways of cards to interact with the Food Chain on the table.
Right, and that's really where Karl is going to get a significant edge. If he's able to ever stick a Food Chain, even if he's not combo killing that turn, the threat of the combo over the next few turns, any resolve Mist Hollow Griffin or anything like that is going to result in infinite mana and a huge headache for Bob Haung.
All right, so we have sideboards up now. So for Bob Haung, the options here, 2 Pyroblast, an Abrade, an Is It Staticaster, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, a Pithing Needle, an Engineered Explosives, a Winter Orb, 2 Flusterstorm, a Surgical Extraction, 2 Bitter Blossom, and a Diabolic Edict. Does any of this look good to you?
No.
Yeah, it is rough, right?
Two Pyroblast is about it, and it's not even that good. It's good. There's going to be some Force Will fights. It can counter a Leovold on the stack. It can counter a Mist Hollow Griffin on the stack. Hell, it can even counter a Hydroid Crisis on the stack. But, I mean, worst comes to worst. It'll be an okay card, at least to tag a Brainstorm. But, I mean, as for everything else, like, are you supposed to bring in as a Staticaster? I actually just don't know. This matchup is not one that I have a lot of experience in, and it's one that I'm sure Bob Wong doesn't have a ton of experience either. As much of a legacy master and heavy legacy player as he is, Food Chain is one of those decks that's few and far between.
Yeah, we'll see exactly how he navigates this going forward. Over on Karl Schultz's side, we have an Engineered Explosives, 2 Surgical Extraction, a Grafdigger's Cage, 3 Thoughtseize, 2 Flusterstorm, a Marsh Casualties, 2 Diabolic Edict, an Assassin's Trophy, a Liliana the Last Hope, and a Vendilion Click. What do you like here?
I mean, I think you kind of continue moving towards that overarching, like, slower game plan. You know, you want to have some disruption, some removal. I think Diabolic Edict and Marsh Casualties are pretty solid because they're answers to True Name Nemesis, while Casualties also clears out things like Young Pyromancer or an early Delver. Liliana Last Hope is pretty good. Vendilion Click's pretty good. I don't know. I think just load up on removal is probably fine. You know, you don't really need those Force of Wills, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Force of Will against a fair deck. Mostly what you'd be trying to catch would be your opponent's Force of Will. I will say one thing about Karl Schultz's deck. There's a little bit of an incentive to leave Force of Will in just because it's a way to exile Mist Hollow Griffin and it doesn't really matter to you.
Right. No, that's certainly fair.
Yeah, so we're playing Legacy this weekend, and we have some great content over at StarCityGames.com. If you're interested in checking that out, you can get some nice highlights in our newsletter, which is totally free to subscribe to. You get highlights from the best articles, upcoming SCG tour dates and location, find out about invitational qualifiers near you, get you set up for SCGCon Summer coming up, find out about game nights, and it's totally free to sign up. There's really no reason not to.
Yeah, I mean, I know way back in the day I was a pretty regular contributor to the newsletter. I wrote little mini articles for it and stuff, and there's just a ton of great content in those, and again, it is free to sign up for.
Players are underway in game number 2. Haung leading on Volcanic Island. Schultz is going to play a fetch land. Pluto Delta on turn 2 for Haung, and no real action just yet.
Yeah, Haung just like kind of playing it slow. He has a Spell Pierce in hand, I think. Probably wants to make sure that Karl's unable to resolve something like Brainstorm on this first few turns.
Second land for Schultz is Tropical Island. He'll go ahead and sacrifice that Verdant Catacombs now. He's at 19, finds Underground Sea. Maybe a turn 2 Baleful Strix.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a perfect foil to Bob Wong kind of sitting on his hands with these reactive spells. You know, that Baleful Strix is quite good against all the threats from Bob Wong except for True Name Nemesis.
Sylvan Library is the cast, actually. That one might force some action.
Yeah, and if Bob has adopted this slower game plan, looking to trade 1-for-1 a bunch, something like Sylvan Library is potentially devastating. I would not be surprised here if Bob wants to fight over this. It looks like he's going to go for a hard cast Daze.
Yeah, cracks his fetch land to 19, and there it is, Daze. That'll take care of the enchantment, which, as we've been discussing, Grixis can't really do anything about on the table, so very beneficial to have the counter spell here. And let's see if Bob can get a threat online. Pretty light graveyard, so it'd be hard to Gurmag Angler from here, but he's going to start with Thoughtscour. He might
yeah,
get there.
I was going to say, tell that to Thoughtscour, baby.
Yeah, he might get there.
I mean, that's one of the newer additions to this archetype. The version that plays for Gurmag Angler are very incentivized to play 4 copies of Thoughtscour. And we see it a good amount in Modern, and it's kind of this newer addition to Legacy. Reminds me a lot of when people used to play Mental Note with Nimble Mongoose.
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Crack of a fetch land for Haung.
what
And here's
did you say at the beginning of the
Gurmag
turn?
Angler.
Pretty sure at the beginning of the turn, so it's going to be pretty hard for him to cast a Gurmag Angler this turn.
Yeah, you know, he worked real hard at it, and he got there.
Yeah, seems like he cast it with a mana up. And that is, of course, I believe, to hold up Spell Pierce, but also has the Lightning Bolt to take care of that Baleful Strix, that potential blocker. No land, though, for Karl Schultz. This could be bad.
Yeah, Schultz had that extra card, but now he's under significant pressure. The Angler's knocking him down to 14 already. Assassin's Trophy, though, that could answer the Gurmag Angler if not for the Spell Pierce.
Yeah, that Spell Pierce there doing some work, but Karl Schultz, the story of this game, when he looks back, it's going to be, why couldn't I draw another land?
Angler rumbles across again. Schultz down to 9. Flooded Strand for Haung will go back Schultz's way. Drew Birds of Paradise, not really a land.
Yeah, that's generally about the times where I draw Birds of Paradise. Just
Ooh, a Murderous Cut, another attempt on the Angler's life.
And this looks like it's going to work, and Karl might have found enough time to stabilize. This Birds of Paradise is not really a land, but it is going to force Bob Haung to deal with it, or else Karl Schultz is going to get online next turn.
Yeah, Schultz had enough cards in graveyard to cut and cast the birds off 2 lands. Haung's going to lightning bolt that, but no additional threat. Just has to pass back after that.
Yeah, and the more time you give this food chain deck, the easier it's going to be to get out of this. Karl Schultz finds his 3rd land. Is it time for food chain?
Yeah, there's Polluted Delta. He'll go to 8. What does he have? He's got a lot of spells in hand, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, that happens when you miss 5 land drops or whatever and also cast a Baleful Strix in the meantime.
Right. Goes and finds a Bayou. Plenty of access to all the colors in the deck.
From my experience, playing this pseudo Protect the Queen game plan, like with Gurmag Angler or Death Shadow, occasionally just falls apart. If your opponent has the removal spell for your 1 threat and you can't find another one, chances are they're going to have enough time to assemble whatever they have, and then the later the game goes, the more difficult it becomes to contain all the stuff they play when your containment is usually things like Daze or Spell Pierce.
And here's a food chain for Schultz. That one resolves. Haung's going to spin his tires, let in a ponder, kept, and he's brainstorming. You got to figure there's something you like there, but it might have just been the brainstorm. We'll see exactly how it goes.
Yeah, it was probably just the brainstorm. He already had a fetch land on the battlefield, so he's able to shuffle away 2 of the bad ones. But if he finds a threat in the meanwhile, or even like a Force Will or something, he might be okay. But with Karl with a handful of cards, I cannot imagine that this game is going to go well for Bob Haung.
Puts 2 back, sacrifices the Flooded Strand. Haung's at 17, finds Underground Sea. Plenty of cards in the graveyard for another Gurmag Angler if he has one. Here's a tap of 2 mana, and there it is, 2nd copy of the fish.
And if I'm not mistaken, his last 2 cards are Force Will and another blue card. So Karl's going to need to get something going here right now.
Pretty nice draw step for Schultz, though. Baleful Strix was picked up off the top.
And if you're Bob Haung, I think you have to snap this off, because that Gurmag Angler as your only form of pressure needs to be able to close this game out in 2 turns.
Schultz casts the Strix, and Haung cannot force a will fast enough. And Schultz puts it in the bin.
Does Schultz have a 1-mana creature to start the chain? He does not.
Angler knocks him to 3. Young Pyromancer added
Shields
to the
are
table
down.
for Haung. Can Schultz combo this turn?
Shields are down.
Misty
What do you got?
Rainforest, Eternal Scourge.
That's infinite mana. What you got?
Where are we going? Ooh, there's the Crisis.
That's drawing the deck. That'll do it.
2-0. Karl Schultz over Bob Haung. Food chain over Grixis Delver, and Schultz is now 7-0 with kind of an unexpected deck.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, food chain just finds a way to win, and there it was just a perfect